I came home without warning, after 40 years of serving my country, dreaming only of hugging my son again. But instead of laughter and open arms, I found silence and a phone call that shattered everything. Ryan was dying alone in the ICU at St. Mary's Hospital in Santa Monica. The nurse's voice trembled when she told me his wife, Lydia, hadn't visited once. Room, I think they said. ICU, 5th floor. I didn't say thank you. I just turned and ran down the sidewalk, my boots hitting the concrete with the same rhythm they once did on ship decks. I flagged down the first cab I saw. St. Mary's Hospital, I told the driver, voice sharp as an order. As fast as you can. The man must have seen the desperation in my eyes, because he didn't ask questions. We sped down the coast, the ocean flickering beside us in flashes of blue and white. A woman who abandoned him. A woman who only cared about herself. Lydia glared at me. You think you're better than me because you wore a uniform? You weren't there either. Her outburst echoed through the room. The judge struck the gavel sharply. Enough. The rest of her testimony unraveled quickly. Every attempt to justify herself twisted into contradiction. The emails, the photographs, the witness statements they built, a cage around her, brick by brick. When closing arguments began, Marcus's voice carried the weight of every mother who had buried a child. This case isn't about vengeance, he said. It's about accountability, Mrs. Lydia Graves took from her husband not just his money, but his dignity. She left him alone to die, while she lived like royalty. Today, this court has the power to tell every person like her that compassion is not optional, it is a duty. Lydia's lawyer tried to spin pity one last time, calling her a misunderstood young widow. The words barely left his mouth before the judge interrupted. Counselor, I've heard enough. She turned to Lydia. Mrs. Graves, your actions show deliberate indifference to your husband's suffering and reckless misuse of shared assets. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The gavel came down with a clean, echoing crack. Lydia gasped, her painted smile finally breaking. You can't do this, she screamed. It's my life. No, I said quietly, standing. It was his. The judge's order was clear. Full restitution of all misused funds to Ryan's estate, revocation of Lydia's inheritance rights, and a referral to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. As the bailiff led her away, Lydia turned back, her eyes wild. You think you've won, old woman? You've ruined me. I met her gaze evenly. No, you ruined yourself. Outside, the press swarmed. Microphones thrust forward, questions firing from every direction. Mrs. Graves, how do you feel? Was it revenge or justice? What happens now? I paused at the top of the courthouse steps, the sun blinding but warm. Justice, I said simply. Isn't revenge, it's love defended. The crowd fell silent. For once, the cameras didn't flash. They just listened. Marcus joined me, handing over a sealed envelope. Here, he said, court-certified restitution check. Every cent she took. And I stared at it for a long moment, then shook my head. This doesn't belong to me. He smiled faintly. Then what will you do with it? I looked out toward the horizon, where the sun dipped over the distant Pacific. Something Ryan would be proud of. That evening, I returned home to the quiet hum of the ocean. The house was no longer heavy, it breathed again, full of light and memory. I took the check and placed it inside Ryan's photo album, right beside his graduation picture. Then I opened a blank notebook and began writing plans for a foundation in his name. A fund for young patients fighting cancer without family support. For the first time in months, I felt my hands stop trembling. The war was over, but healing, that was the next mission. It took weeks after the trial for the silence in Ryan's house to sound like peace instead of absence. The reporters eventually left, the neighbors stopped whispering, and the mailbox filled with letters not from banks or lawyers, but from strangers. Some were handwritten, others typed with trembling words. They came from mothers who'd lost their sons to illness, from veterans who understood what it meant to come home too late, from people who had seen the news and wanted to say thank you for standing up when no one else could. Every morning, I'd make coffee the way Ryan used to, strong, black, no sugar, and sit by the window overlooking the Pacific. The waves rolled and crashed, endless and indifferent, and I would listen, trying to imagine that somewhere out there, his laughter was caught in the wind. The check Marcus handed me sat on the counter for days, unopened. One afternoon, I finally tore the envelope open and stared at the figure. $278,450. It was everything Lydia had taken recovered, returned, purified by the law. But to me, it wasn't money. It was the sum of every sleepless night, every unanswered call, every minute my son spent alone. I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. I called Marcus first. "I need your help setting up a nonprofit," I said. He hesitated. "You're not wasting any time." "I've wasted enough," I replied. He smiled through the phone. "What's it called?" "The Ryan Foundation," I said softly. My hands trembled in my lap. I tried to call Lydia, but she didn't answer. Her voicemail chirped cheerfully. "Hey, it's Lydia. Leave something worth listening to." I hung up before the beep. How could she not be there? How could she be laughing somewhere, while Ryan, my son, my only son, was fighting for his life? I gripped my old silver locket, the one with Ryan's baby picture inside. Pressing it so hard against my palm, it left an imprint. For children fighting cancer without family support. Every dollar she took will go to kids who need a chance. "I'll handle the paperwork," he said. "You handle the heart." That night, I sat at Ryan's desk, the same place I had once plotted revenge, and began writing a mission statement instead. No child should face death alone. No mother should lose a child to neglect. The words poured out of me like a prayer, cleansing everything that vengeance had hardened. Within a month, the foundation was registered. Reeves pulled strings to get a small office near the VA hospital in San Diego. Volunteers came quickly. Doctors, nurses, and social workers who had heard my story and wanted to help. Donations started trickling in from people I'd never met. A woman in Ohio sent $20. A retired teacher in Texas mailed a check with a note that read, "For Ryan and for my son, who didn't make it." Each contribution felt like a thread stitching a wound closed. But it was one letter that changed everything. It came from St. Mary's Hospital, the same place Ryan had taken his last breath. The envelope was thin, with the hospital logo in the corner. Inside was a note from Dr. Coleman. "Mrs. Graves, we've started a children's wing expansion. There's a boy here, 8 years old, stage 2 leukemia. His name is Noah. He's been in the system for months. No family left. I thought you might want to meet him. Dr. C." I read it twice, then folded it neatly. For a long moment, I stared at the ocean through the window. The sun was dipping low, turning the sky amber. I could almost hear Ryan whisper, "Go." The next morning, I drove to St. Mary's. Walking through those hospital doors again was like reopening a wound I'd thought had scarred over. The smell of antiseptic, the hum of fluorescent lights, it was all the same. But this time, I wasn't walking toward death. I was walking toward something else. Dr. Coleman met me in the pediatric wing. His face softened when he saw me. "Mrs. Graves," he said warmly, "thank you for coming." He led me to a small room at the end of the hallway. Inside sat a boy, thin and pale, drawing on a sketch pad. His hair was patchy from chemo, but his eyes bright, ocean blue, lit up when he saw us. "Noah," Dr. Coleman said gently, "this is Mrs. Graves. She's someone special." The boy grinned shyly. "Hi, M. I smiled, my voice trembling. Hi, sweetheart. What are you drawing? He turned the pad around. A small boat, sailing under a bright yellow Sunday. It's going home, he said simply. Something in me broke and healed all at once. Over the next few weeks, I visited Noah every other day. We'd play chess, read stories, or just talk. He was funny, sharp, and far too wise for his age. One afternoon, as I was helping him build a model ship, he looked up suddenly. Mrs. Graves? Yes? Why do you come here so much? I hesitated, feeling the weight of the question. Because I lost my son, I said quietly, and I think he'd want me to be here. He nodded solemnly, as if understanding something beyond words. Then maybe I can be your son for a while, he said, almost whispering. The tears came before I could stop them. I reached over and held his tiny hand. Maybe you can, I whispered back. By Christmas, Noah's condition had stabilized. The doctors said the chemo was working better than expected. One snowy afternoon, a rare cold spell in Southern California, I met with a social worker who asked if I'd consider becoming Noah's legal guardian. When she handed me the papers, I didn't hesitate. I signed my name with steady hands. For the first time since Ryan's death, I felt something inside me unfurl, soft, fragile, alive. The Ryan Foundation grew quickly after that. With Reeves's help, we secured a partnership with Street Mary's to cover treatment costs for low-income families. Marcus handled the legal side, making sure every cent was protected. I managed operations personally, visiting the kids every week. Sometimes, I'd see a mother sitting by a hospital bed, her face lined with exhaustion, her hand gripping her child's. I'd sit beside her, offer coffee, and tell her about Ryan, about how love can survive even after loss, how justice can turn into healing if you let it. At night, when Noah slept in the small bedroom I'd painted sky blue just for him, I'd stand by the door and listen to the steady rhythm of his breathing. Peace, I realized, didn't come from revenge or even victory. It came from choosing to keep loving, even after love had been used against you. One evening, Marcus visited the house. He stood by the porch railing, watching the sunset. You've done it, he said softly. You've turned pain into something that matters. I shrugged, half smiling. I'd survived gunfire, explosions, and the endless weight of command. But this helplessness was unbearable. The cab screeched to a stop in front of the hospital. I threw a few bills at the driver and ran through the sliding doors. The smell of antiseptic hit me instantly. I approached the reception desk, breathless. My son, Ryan Graves. Where is he? The young nurse behind the counter typed quickly, eyes darting over the screen. ICU, 5th floor, room 514. Maybe, or maybe I just needed somewhere to put it. He looked at me, eyes kind. You know, Ryan would have been proud. The words caught me off guard. I looked out toward the ocean, where the waves caught the fading light and scattered it in shards of gold. I hope so, I whispered. Behind us, Noah's laughter floated through the open window. It was light and real and full of life. I hadn't heard that sound in this house for years. It felt like the world was finally exhaling after holding its breath for too long. That night, before bed, Noah came to my room, holding a small drawing. I made this for you, he said, handing it over. It was another boat, just like the one from the hospital, but this time, two people stood on deck, waving. Above them, written in uneven letters, me and Mom. I couldn't speak. I pulled him close, breathing in the warmth of his small shoulders. I love you, Noah, I whispered. I love you too, he said sleepily. Good night, Mom. When he left, I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the drawing to my chest. The ache in my heart was still there, but it was softer now, like an old scar that no longer hurt when touched. Outside, the ocean sang its endless song. I imagined Ryan somewhere beyond it, watching, smiling. I kept my promise, I murmured. You're not alone anymore. I walked to the window, opened it, and let the sea breeze fill the room. The air smelled of salt, eucalyptus, and something new hope. In the distance, the waves glimmered like silver under the moonlight. And for the first time since that terrible morning, I allowed myself to rest. Tomorrow, I'd wake up and drive Noah to his next checkup. Tomorrow, I'd visit the foundation office and meet another family who needed help. Tomorrow, I'd keep building something beautiful out of the ruins Lydia left behind. But tonight, I just stood there, listening to the sound of the water, and let myself believe that maybe, somehow, Ryan was home again, through every life his name would touch, through every heartbeat that would keep going, because I didn't give up. And as the wind swept through the curtains, carrying the faint scent of the sea, I whispered into the night, "Thank you for coming back to me, my boy." If there's one truth life has taught me, it's that justice and healing are not opposites. They're two halves of the same road. One begins in fire, the other ends in light. When I first came home, all I wanted was to make someone pay. Lydia had taken everything from me, my son, my peace, my sense of meaning. But as the months passed, I learned that revenge alone is hollow. It burns hot, yes, but it leaves ash behind. What saves us after the flames is what we build next. The Ryan Foundation became that for me. Every child who smiled through the pain, every parent who found hope in a place that once meant goodbye, that was Ryan's legacy. Not the courtroom or the verdict. It was love rewritten as purpose. Sometimes people ask me if I've forgiven Lydia. I don't have a simple answer. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about letting someone escape accountability. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of hate. I don't think about her anymore. She's just a shadow that once tried to cover the light. Now, I wake up each morning to the sound of waves and a boy's laughter echoing down the hallway. Noah's hair has grown back, his cheeks full again. He's healthy, alive, mischievous. When he calls me Mom, I still pause for a heartbeat, as if the universe is reminding me how far I've come. People tell me I'm strong, but the truth is, I wasn't always. Strength isn't something you're born with, it's something grief carves out of you when you have no other choice. You learn to breathe through the ache, to stand up when your knees want to give way, and to keep loving even when love has betrayed you once before. If you've lost someone, if you've been broken by life's unfairness, I want you to remember this. You are still allowed to find joy. You are still allowed to build again. The world may not apologize, but it does give second chances to those who dare to keep their hearts open. Ryan's gone, but his name lives on through every heartbeat we've helped, through every small victory against despair. And in that, I find peace not because I erased the pain, but because I transformed it. So, to anyone listening tonight, hold on. Justice is not just punishment. It's the reclamation of your worth. Love does not end with loss. It begins again in the hands that choose to heal. And when you finally find your light again, don't forget to share it. I didn't wait for the elevator. I took the stairs, 2 at a time, ignoring the ache in my knees. 40 years of training couldn't prepare me for this climb, the kind that burns through muscle and fear alike. When I reached the 5th floor, the world went quiet. The hallway was lined with closed doors and the rhythmic beeping of machines. I found 514 and pushed it open. Ryan lay in the bed, surrounded by tubes and wires, his face pale as linen. My knees nearly gave out. Because someone out there still needs a reason to believe that they too can rise from the ashes. A doctor looked up from the monitors. "Are you family?" I nodded. "I'm his mother." He hesitated. "I'm Dr. Coleman. I'm sorry to tell you this, Mrs. Graves. Your son's cancer is in its final stage." He's been unresponsive for the past 24 hours. My mouth went dry. Cancer? Yes, stomach cancer. We caught it too late. My mind refused to absorb his words. I'd spoken to Ryan only 2 months ago. He'd sounded tired but cheerful. He said Lydia was taking care of him, making sure he was eating right. I stepped closer, reaching for his hand. It was cold, thinner than I remembered. Ryan? I whispered. It's Mom. I'm here. His eyelids fluttered, barely a movement, but enough to break me open. His lips parted, a whisper escaping. Mom, I... Before he could finish, the machine screamed in a single piercing note. No! I shouted. No! Stay with me. The doctor moved quickly, shouting for a nurse, pressing defibrillator pads to his chest. My body froze as the shocks jolted his frame. Once, twice. Nothing. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor lowered his hands. I'm sorry. The words didn't register at first. My legs buckled, and I caught myself on the edge of the bed. My son, my reason for surviving all those years of war, was gone. Someone gently touched my shoulder, guiding me toward the hallway, but I couldn't move. I just stared at his still face, at the life that had slipped away without me noticing. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Through blurred vision, I glanced down. Lydia's name flashed on the screen. With shaking fingers, I answered. What do you want? I whispered. Music and laughter poured through the line. Lydia's voice was bright, careless. Oh, hi, Eleanor. I heard you're back. I can't talk long. I'm in the middle of something. What's up? I swallowed hard. Ryan's gone, I said, barely recognizing my own voice. He died 20 minutes ago. There was silence, brief but telling. Then she sighed. Oh, that's awful. Listen, I'll call you later, okay? I'm kind of busy right now. The line went dead. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. I stood there, in the middle of the sterile white room, with the machine still humming, and realized that grief could turn into something else, something sharp, cold, and deliberate. Not sorrow, not despair, something darker. That was the moment I stopped being the soldier who followed orders and became the mother who would make sure justice was served. The world blurred around me as I stumbled out of the ICU, the cold white walls of Street Mary's bending and pulsing with the rhythm of my own heartbeat. The sterile air stung my throat. I could still hear the flat line echoing in my skull, like the memory refused to fade. My hands went numb, gripping the edge of the table, until I saw Lydia's latest post flashing across my phone screen, her smile bright, champagne in hand, celebrating a yacht party under the California Sunday. When I landed at LAX that morning, the California sun had just begun to rise over the ocean, painting the terminal windows in gold. I'd spent 40 years following orders, sleeping under the metallic hum of warships, counting days by mission briefings and gunfire. My son, my Ryan, was gone, and I hadn't even been there to hold his hand until the end. I found myself in the hospital corridor, clutching the silver locket around my neck so tightly that the edges cut into my palm. For years, I had survived everything that the Navy threw at me: combat zones, hunger, the weight of command, but nothing had prepared me for this silence. The kind of silence that devours sound, that swallows even your breathing. The nurse approached softly, holding a transparent plastic bag. Inside were Ryan's belongings: his wallet, his wristwatch, a cracked cell phone, and a small photo of the two of us taken on Coronado Beach when he was 7. His smile in that picture was all sunshine, wind, and innocence. I bit my lip hard enough to taste blood. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Mrs. Graves," the nurse said. "You can collect the medical records at the administrative desk when you're ready." I nodded, my voice gone. When she left, I pressed the photo against my chest. "I'm here, baby," I whispered. "I came home. I'm sorry I was too late." The clock on the wall ticked slow, deliberate, merciless. Each second scraped against my ribs. Finally, I forced myself toward the administrative office. My legs felt like concrete, but I moved. That's what 40 years of discipline does. It teaches you to move, even when your heart wants to collapse. At the desk, a young administrator handed me a folder thick with papers. "These are your son's medical files," she said. "And this," she paused, holding up another sheet. "This is the emergency contact record." There, in neat black ink, under primary contact, Lydia Graves. "Did anyone try to reach her?" I asked, my tone cutting through the air sharper than intended. "Yes," she said quietly. "We called several times, left messages, sent texts. No response." I closed my eyes for a second, breathing in through my nose. Lydia had ignored every call. My son had been dying alone while his wife partied under the California Sunday. Something inside me shifted, snapped. Maybe. I didn't cry. Not then. The tears would have been too easy, too merciful. What I felt wasn't grief anymore. It was purpose. I left the hospital with the folder tucked under my arm and Ryan's belongings clutched in my hand. The sun outside was blinding, cruelly bright. People passed by laughing, sipping coffee, checking their phones, as if the world hadn't just ended. When I reached Ryan's house again, I stood there for a long time on the porch, staring at the locked door. My reflection in the glass looked older than I remembered. Wrinkles carved deep from years of service, eyes hollow but burning with something fierce. I pulled out my keys, found the spare one Ryan had given me years ago, and pushed the door open. The smell hit first stale air, spilled wine, and something rotten underneath. The once tidy home I'd helped them build was in ruins. Empty bottles lay on the kitchen counter. Lipstick-stained glasses lined up like trophies. The sink overflowed with dishes crusted in mold. I stepped into the living room, the air thick with dust and perfume. A sequined dress was thrown across the couch, its shimmer dulled by grime. On the coffee table sat an open laptop and a half-empty bottle of champagne. The screen still glowed, showing Lydia's social media feed. Beaches, parties, designer clothes, and that same haunting smile, wide and practiced. I scrolled down, each photo cutting deeper. Malibu, Palm Springs, Catalina Island. Her captions were shallow bursts of vanity. "Life's too short to worry. Cheers to freedom. Freedom." I slammed the laptop shut and felt the vibration echo through my bones. Ryan's voice came back to me, faint and exhausted, from our last phone call 2 months ago. "I'm fine, Mom. Lydia's taking care of everything. You just focus on your work. You've done enough." He'd said it like he was comforting me, when all along he was the one who needed saving. On the dining table, I noticed a stack of unopened mail. I tore through it mechanically. Hospital bills, credit card statements, bank notices. Then, one envelope caught my eye, a statement from the joint account I had set up for Ryan years ago. My name was still listed as secondary owner. I unfolded the page, and the numbers blurred for a moment before sinking in. Luxury purchases, jewelry stores, yacht rentals, designer boutiques in Beverly Hills. Tens of thousands of dollars gone. And every transaction dated during the last 3 months, while Ryan's medical condition worsened. My stomach turned. I dropped into the nearest chair, gripping the edge of the table as if to steady myself. Lydia hadn't just abandoned him. But that morning, for the first time, I felt like a civilian again. A mother. My uniform was gone, folded away in the duffel bag at my feet, and all that remained was a trembling excitement to see my son, Ryan. I hailed a cab and gave the driver an address that I'd repeated to myself through the entire flight. Pacific Avenue, number 248, Santa Monica. He nodded, and we pulled onto the freeway. She had used his money, my money, to fund her own indulgence while Ryan was fighting for his life. I rose, walked to the bedroom, and pushed open the door. The bed was unmade, the sheets stained with spilled makeup. On the nightstand, under a tangle of jewelry, sat a small notebook. I opened it. Ryan's handwriting filled the pages. He'd written dates, expenses, and notes. Lydia said she needed money for meds. Gave her $2,000. She promised to pay hospital deposit. Then, near the last page, feeling weaker every day. Lydia says the doctor's just exaggerating. But I can't eat. My stomach burns all night. She hasn't slept here in 3 days. The letters trailed off, shaky, ending mid-sentence. I pressed my hand over the page, feeling the indentations of his handwriting beneath my fingertips. Every stroke was a whisper from a dying man who still believed in love that had long since rotted. I sat there for what felt like hours, listening to the ticking of the old wall clock and the distant sound of waves. The house creaked, hollow, but I could almost hear his laughter still echoing through it. My throat tightened. Finally, I stood. My military instincts kicked in, the part of me that knew how to organize chaos, to fight back even when outnumbered. Lydia had turned my son's final months into her playground. That would end. I gathered everything: Ryan's notebook, the bank statements, the unopened mail, and packed them neatly into a folder. Then I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and looked out the window. Across the street, Mrs. Thompson was watching, pretending to prune her roses but clearly worried. I stepped outside. "Mrs. Thompson," I called softly. She crossed over, her eyes kind but sad. "Eleanor, I can't tell you how sorry I am. Did you see Lydia at all these past 2 weeks?" Her lips pressed together. "Not once. But I did see a delivery truck come by every few days, expensive boxes, luxury brand names. She had them delivered here even after Ryan went to the hospital. I thought maybe it was stress shopping or something. But now," I nodded slowly, my jaw tightening. "It's okay. You've told me enough." She hesitated, then added, "I wish I'd called you sooner." You couldn't have known," I said, though my voice cracked. When she left, I walked back into the house and sat at Ryan's desk. The sun had begun to set, and the light spilled across the floor like blood. I turned on the lamp and pulled Ryan's phone from the bag the nurse had given me. The screen was cracked, but it powered on. I went through the messages, most of them between him and Lydia. Her words were cold, careless. "Stop being dramatic. You'll be fine. I'm going out with friends tonight." Then one message from 3 weeks ago, time-stamped at 11:47 p.m. "Ryan, please come home. I don't think I can make it through the night. Lydia." "You always say that. I'm tired. Get some sleep." That was the last message. My throat tightened until I could barely breathe. I closed my eyes and heard Ryan's faint whisper again in the hospital room. "Mom, and then nothing. I opened my eyes and stared at the photo on the desk. Ryan at his college graduation, arms wrapped around Lydia, her smile bright and fake even then. I took the picture frame in my hands, stared at it for a long moment, then set it face down. "Enough," I whispered. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in Ryan's chair until dawn, staring at the folder of evidence and the glow of the laptop screen. When the first light of morning broke through the curtains, I reached for the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Colonel Reeves," a deep voice answered on the other end, rough with age. "Who's calling?" "Eleanor Graves," I said evenly. "I need your help." A pause, then a low exhale. "It's been a long time, Graves. What's going on?" "My son's dead," I said. "And I'm going to make sure the person who let it happen pays for it." Silence. Then, quietly, "Tell me what you need." I looked around the wreck of my son's home, at the evidence of betrayal glittering under the morning sun, and felt my resolve harden into something solid cold, and unbreakable. "I need access," I said, "to every financial record tied to Lydia Graves." I moved like I had been trained to move quiet, methodical, every step measured against a plan that had to work. Grief had sharpened into a tool in my hands, and I used it to focus on details that anger alone would have overlooked. I watched the skyline glide past the palm trees, the ocean to the west, the long ribbons of sunlight across the asphalt. California looked exactly the same as when I left, but I wasn't. My body still carried the rhythm of the Navy, precise, sharp, unyielding. Yet beneath that discipline was a pulse I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Ryan had been my only child since my husband's passing 2 decades ago. Every paycheck I earned, every mission I accepted, every medal I tucked away was for him. First, I needed legal access. Ryan had signed a limited financial power of attorney a year before, when his symptoms had first worried him. He'd insisted it was just in case, and he'd trusted me to do right by him. That paper was the key. With it, I could demand records, freeze accounts, and, if necessary, petition the court for temporary control. I drove to the Navy base office where Colonel Reeves still kept a desk, the scent of engine grease and old paper thick in the air. Reeves was a blunt man, with a face that looked like it had been carved from the same decisions he'd made in war. When I explained what I'd found, he did not blink. He made 3 calls and gave me contacts, someone in cyber forensics, a banker who owed him a favor, and an old law colleague who would know which motions to file at odd hours. Marcus Hale arrived the next morning with a suit that didn't hide the lines on his face and a briefcase full of certainty. He listened without interruption as I laid out the evidence. The bank statements, the credit card charges with designer names, the yacht rental receipts, the messages in Ryan's notebook, and the last pleading texts Ryan had sent to Lydia. Marcus's jaw tightened as he flipped through pages. "This isn't just theft," he said finally. "It's financial abuse and abandonment. If we move fast, we can get an emergency order to freeze assets and a temporary conservatorship petition filed before Lydia has time to liquidate anything." The way he spoke made it sound like logistics rather than vengeance, clean, efficient. A procedure with rules and predictable outcomes, and for the first time since Ryan's death, I felt relief settle like armor over my chest. We created a chain of custody for every scrap of paper. The Navy scanner, an old piece of equipment Reeves let me borrow, became my altar. I scanned every receipt, every page of the notebook, every message I found on Ryan's cracked phone and on the laptop. Marcus stamped each PDF and had me sign a declaration swearing to their authenticity. We encrypted the files and uploaded copies to a secure cloud drive that Marcus controlled. "If anyone tries to claim these are fabricated," he said, "we'll have originals and notarized copies." The attention to detail felt ritualistic. Each careful step was a promise to a dead son that I would not let his end be erased by excuses and champagne. While Marcus prepared the emergency petition, Reeves reached out to contacts at the bank that handled Ryan's accounts. The woman on the other end of that call, Lena, a senior manager who remembered me by reputation more than by face, answered after a pause. I could hear the traffic clatter in the background. She was in downtown, and her voice was businesslike but not unkind. I told her what I had. I did not cry. I did not plead. I explained the legal documents I had, the suspicious transactions, and the fact that the account holder was deceased and the primary contact had been unreachable. She promised to put a temporary freeze on any transfers from the joint account and to flag suspicious withdrawals. "We'll need a certified death certificate and the court's emergency order to transfer control," she said. "But we can stop outgoing payments pending verification." I felt a tremor of triumph that was nearly indistinguishable from relief. We had to find Lydia. Marcus warned me that lawyers could file motions and judges could issue orders. But the practical reality of confronting her, looking into the face of the woman who'd preferred yachts to hospital beds, was another matter. Reeves called Luis, his old tech contact, and in less than an hour, we had a ping on Lydia's phone. An AIS ping from a pleasure vessel registered in Malibu, coordinates drifting like a smear of the sea. Marcus printed the map and circled the area in red. "She's not hiding," he said. "She's advertising." The audacity of it made bile rise in my throat. A woman who had used the last months of a dying man's life as a season for shopping sat somewhere on the blue water with a cocktail glass in her hand. The law would find her, but I wanted more. I wanted witnesses. I wanted photos. I wanted the world to see what she had chosen. We hired a private investigator on Reeves's recommendation, a tall woman named Rosa, who moved like a shadow and smelled faintly of coffee. Rosa knew yachts. While I was stationed overseas, I wired him money faithfully, trusting his wife, Lydia, to manage things. Ryan had always said she was sweet, young, still figuring herself out. I believed him. I wanted to. The cab wound its way through the quiet streets of Santa Monica. The air was thick with salt and sea breeze, and the sun burned brighter now, warming the world in that lazy California way. She knew which marinas took cash and which ones accepted credit cards traceable to corporate names. She brought photographs 2 days later, taken through a long lens. Lydia laughing on deck, a designer bag at her feet, champagne flutes glittering, a group of young people leaning into the sun as if nothing had happened, 3 blocks inland, where a hospital had a blank bed. The photos felt obscene in their brightness. Marcus loaded them into our case binder and printed them twice. We would use them in court. We would make them part of the record. I wrapped my hands around the images until my knuckles went white, then set them down as if they were live coals. Lydia's first calls came as if nothing were wrong, rambling, petulant, sharp. She demanded the account be reopened, accused me of overreacting, and tried to shame me with thinly veiled threats about messing with her life. I played calm. Calm was sharper than fury and cleaner. Marcus told me to let them ring. "They're trying to bait you," he said. "They'll say anything to make you react." He filed the emergency motion that afternoon. Request for immediate freeze, temporary conservatorship, and an injunction, preventing Lydia from accessing or disposing of any property connected to Ryan's estate. We submitted the scanned paperwork with my notarized signature, the hospital's death certificate attached, and the printed chain of custody. The judge's clerk called within hours, asking for verification, and scheduled a hearing for the early morning. The legal machinery moved quicker when it smelled urgency and a risk of flight. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at Ryan's dining table with a lamp throwing a pool of light over the binder of evidence, and I drew up a timeline on an old legal pad: dates, charges, messages, travel logs. I annotated the yacht rental receipt with the hour Ryan had been admitted to the ER. I numbered receipts and matched them to messages in his notebook where he'd written that he'd given Lydia cash for medications. Each match felt like a stitch, binding her actions to a narrative that could not be denied. At 3 a.m., Marcus called with an update. The bank had frozen the joint account temporarily and placed a hold on upcoming card charges. "It's not permanent," he warned, "but it buys us time until the hearing." Time. For a mercenary like me, who had always measured tasks by objectives and timelines, time was a weapon I could wield. When dawn came, the house felt smaller, threatening. There was a knock at the door mid-morning that sent my heart slamming into my ribs. I opened it to find a courier with a thick envelope and a single photograph stuffed inside. Lydia had left it on the porch, a perfunctory note that read, "You have no right," and a picture Ryan, alive, grinning at a barbecue months ago, a smear of sauce on his cheek. It was meant to wound, to remind me of what I had lost in a way that made me question my right to any action. I turned the photo over, looked at the glossy face frozen in time, and felt nothing but fierce resolve. I would not be swayed by guilt manipulated into weaponry. At the courthouse, the judge, an older woman with quiet eyes and a voice like a bell, listened as Marcus laid out the case: dereliction of duty, financial exploitation, and abandonment. Dr. Coleman, the hospital physician, had been subpoenaed and sat in a suit that looked too new for his tired features. He testified with clinical calm, reading from logs that showed attempted contacts to Lydia and the absence of family at pivotal moments. We displayed the yacht photographs, the bank statements, the messages. The law is a language of proof, and on that morning we spoke it fluently. Lydia's attorney tried to cast doubt, suggested that money transfers had been consensual, that a marriage complicates ownership. Marcus's reply was a slow, surgical unpacking of the timeline, a series of choices Lydia made when Ryan's capacity to protect himself diminished. The judge listened, and when she spoke, it was with a tone that closed arguments like doors. She issued an immediate temporary restraining order, preventing Lydia from accessing any accounts, and appointed me as temporary conservator for Ryan's estate until a full hearing could be held. When the gavel fell, Lydia erupted into a display of fury pleas, threats, and then, finally, a kind of vulgar, loud sobbing that seemed engineered for cameras. She stormed out, flinging words at us like knives. When we stopped in front of Ryan's house, a white bungalow with blue shutters and a tiny front garden, I felt my chest tighten. The same house I'd helped them buy 6 years ago, but something was off. The curtains were drawn. The lawn was overgrown, the mailbox stuffed with unopened letters. I frowned, paying the driver before stepping out. The silence was strange, almost too heavy for such a bright morning. I wheeled my suitcase up the front steps and rang the bell. Nothing. I waited. I watched her go with an almost clinical interest. The courtroom buzzed. The press outside snapped pictures, and people whispered, as if they were watching a spectacle unfold from a safe distance. I felt none of the triumph I'd imagined. The victory was administrative, necessary, but it did not bring Ryan back. It only put the pieces in a place where they could no longer be stolen. Outside the courthouse, a woman stopped me, eyes wet and voice small. My brother, he had cancer too. Thank you. She pressed a folded note into my hand. No name, only a trembling message of gratitude. It was absurd how something so small could feel like balm. The legal steps were complete for now. The conservatorship gave Marcus the authority to pursue restitution and to manage the funds for the benefit of the estate. But paperwork could not fill the hollowness Ryan left, and the photographs of Lydia laughing on that yacht still lay on my desk, like evidence of an absence I could not fill with money or legal orders. That night, I stood on the porch and watched the sun slip into the Pacific, the horizon a thin, burning slice. The ocean looked indifferent, the same expanse that had watched me sail into storms and wars. I pressed my palm to the cool wood rail and felt the outline of the map we'd printed, coordinates circled in red, the place where Lydia had gone to celebrate. Justice had begun to move in measured steps. There was more to do. Civil suits, charges, and perhaps criminal investigations. But for now, with the bank's freeze and the judge's order, I had stopped the immediate hemorrhage. I had built a small fortress around what remained of Ryan's life. It was a start, and sometimes a start is enough to shift the course of grief into something actionable. I turned back inside, collected the folder of scans and the printed photos, locked them in a safe place, and let myself sink briefly into the chair at his desk, feeling the exhaustion that comes from having carried too many storms alone. By the time the court's temporary order came through, I had already stopped thinking like a grieving mother. I'd slipped back into my old rhythm, the mindset that kept me alive through 4 decades of Navy discipline. You don't win wars by crying over what's lost. You win by protecting what's left. I spent the following days at Ryan's house, now eerily quiet, gathering what remained of his life into boxes labeled evidence and memories. I'd separated them instinctively, one for the courts, the other for my heart. Every night, I'd sit in the kitchen where he used to make coffee before work, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint echo of ocean waves in the distance. Sometimes, I caught myself whispering to him as if he could still hear me. "I'm not done, Ryan. I won't let her walk away." Marcus called early that Monday morning. "The judge's order is in full effect," he said. "Lydia can't touch a cent. Her cards are frozen. Her attorneys already tried to appeal, but the evidence is too strong." I looked out the window. The morning light poured across the dusty floorboards, turning everything gold and cruel. "What's her next move?" "She'll try to fight back," Marcus said, "or she'll beg. Either way, you hold your ground. No contact without me present." "I've dealt with worse," I muttered. He chuckled quietly. "I'm starting to believe that." Within an hour, my phone lit up Lydia's name, flashing again and again. I let it ring until the screen went black. Then came the messages. At first, they were furious. "You had no right. You're ruining my life." Then they softened. "Please, Eleanor." I didn't know how sick he was. I just needed a break. Then desperation. "Can we talk? I'm scared. I don't have anywhere to go." Her words slid over me like oil. No remorse. No mention of Ryan. Only her own fear of losing the luxury she'd built from his suffering. That evening, I drove to Colonel Reeves's office on the naval base. The place smelled of old paper, metal, and dust, like time itself had been trapped between those walls. Reeves looked up from his desk, his white hair gleaming under the fluorescent light. "You're not sleeping," he said bluntly. "Neither are you," I replied. Hay smirked. "Touché." I handed him a folder. Rang again. Still nothing. My breath grew shallow. Lydia was always quick to answer, even just to brag about her latest renovation or travel plan. This stillness was wrong. I turned, scanning the neighborhood. A familiar voice called out from across the street. "Eleanor, is that you?" It was Mrs. Thompson, the elderly widow who'd lived next door to Ryan since he moved here. She was standing on her porch, a watering can in hand, eyes wide. "Here's everything from the bank and hospital. Lydia's assets, transaction logs, the hospital's negligence reports, anything that might link her spending to his medical delay." Reeves flipped through it, his brow furrowing. "She's clever. Used multiple cards, rotated purchases through dummy accounts. This isn't just selfishness. It's premeditated siphoning. Can we prove it?" He nodded slowly. "With the right data? Yes. But it'll take time." "I don't care how long it takes," I said. "She took time from Ryan. I'll take everything else from her." That night, I returned to Ryan's home with a sense of purpose so strong it almost felt holy. I pulled his old laptop closer, powered it on, and connected to the encrypted drive Marcus had set up. I wanted to see every number, every receipt, every betrayal laid out in cold digits. Hours passed. My eyes burned, but the pattern became clearer. Lydia had been draining Ryan's accounts long before he got sick, using small transfers, emergency withdrawals, and fabricated payments to medical suppliers that didn't exist. Each charge was another knife to the gut. She hadn't just failed him. She'd bled him dry while pretending to love him. At one point, I stopped and pressed my hands flat against the desk, whispering to the empty room, "You trusted the wrong woman, Ryan. But she won't hurt anyone else again." "I am." My phone buzzed again, another call from Lydia. I almost ignored it, but something inside me wanted to hear her voice, just once, to confirm the monster I already knew she was. I answered. "Eleanor," she breathed, her tone suddenly fragile. "Please, don't hang up." I said nothing. "I didn't mean for things to get so bad," she continued quickly. "You don't understand what it's like. Ryan he was so difficult near the end. He didn't want help. He pushed me away." Miyef clenched. "He asked you to come home the night he died." Her breath hitched. How do you know that? I read the messages. Silence. Then a faint, defiant laugh. You went through his phone? That's private. You left him to die alone. My voice came out low, even the tone I used to deliver orders. There's nothing private about that. I was scared, she snapped, her voice rising. Do you think I could watch him waste away like that? He wasn't the same man. I needed air. I needed something beautiful to look at. My stomach turned. So you bought yachts. I deserved it, she shouted. After everything I gave up for him. The line went silent for a long moment. Just the faint sound of waves somewhere behind her. Then, in a trembling whisper, you can't win this, Eleanor. You think the court cares about your grief? Money talks, lawyers talk. I'll get it all back. I hung up. Her voice lingered like smoke. The next morning, I met Marcus at his downtown office. He was already pacing when I arrived. His sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. We're filing civil charges, he said without preamble. Financial exploitation of a dependent adult. Emotional neglect leading to wrongful death. It's aggressive, but we can build it. Do it, I said. He hesitated. Eleanor, this isn't about revenge anymore. Once we move forward, it'll be public. The press will eat it up. Good, I said coldly. Let them see her for who she is. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. All right, we'll do it your way. By noon, the legal machinery was in motion. Marcus filed the suit, and Reeves's contact at the financial department confirmed that federal investigators would review Lydia's activity for fraud. Lydia's world began to shrink, accounts frozen, assets flagged, calls ignored by her own friends once the news broke. Still, she didn't disappear. She started showing up outside the courthouse, sometimes alone, sometimes with a photographer she'd clearly hired. She'd dress in black, sunglasses covering her eyes, playing the grieving widow. Her false tears disgusted me. One afternoon, as I exited the courthouse after a deposition, she approached, her voice dripping sugar. Eleanor, we don't have to keep doing this. Ryan wouldn't want us tearing each other apart. I turned to her, calm as steel. Ryan wouldn't have wanted to die alone either. But that didn't stop you. Her expression faltered for a split second before she smiled again, a thin, poisonous curve. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said, stepping closer. But you'll live with it. The flash of a camera caught us mid-stare, immortalizing the moment for the tabloids. By evening, photos of the grieving mother and the widow at war flooded local news. You came back, she said, setting the can down. But you don't know, do you? My heart dropped. Know what? She hesitated, her lips tightening as if holding back tears. Your boy. Ryan's in the hospital. Street Mary's. In Santa Monica. He's been there for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The words hit like a punch to the ribs. What happened? I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. Mrs. Thompson sighed and took a slow step toward the edge of her porch. They brought him in one night. The narrative Lydia had tried to spin poor young wife, persecuted by bitter mother-in-law, crumbled as soon as the court documents leaked. The yacht photos hit the front page, and the internet turned on her within hours. I didn't feel satisfaction. Just silence. The kind that follows the final shot in a war. Still, justice had to be complete. Marcus called the following week with news from the investigator. We've traced funds Lydia transferred to offshore accounts, he said. About $120,000. We can recover it if the court extends your conservatorship. I exhaled slowly. Do it. Every cent she stole will go somewhere it matters. That night, I opened Ryan's old photo albums. Between the pages were snapshots of birthdays, barbecues, small smiles. One caught my eye, Ryan and Lydia on the pier, holding ice cream cones, his arm around her shoulder. I stared at it for a long time, searching for any hint of the woman she'd become. There was none. Only a stranger, pretending to love my son. I set the photo back down and whispered, "You won't win, Lydia. Not this time." 2 days later, the court granted full control of Ryan's estate to me. Lydia's lawyer filed an appeal, but couldn't overturn the decision. Her credit was ruined, her name blacklisted in every financial institution that mattered. She tried to reach me again, this time with handwritten letters slipped under my door. I didn't read them. I kept them in a folder marked irrelevant evidence. Then, just when the dust seemed to settle, Marcus called with a different tone in his voice, half triumph, half disbelief. "You'll want to see this." He handed me a USB drive containing a recovered email thread between Lydia and one of her friends. In it, Lydia bragged about using Ryan's insurance money for the yacht deposit, boasting that the old lady will never find out. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. The audacity, the cruelty, it was bottomless. I looked up at Marcus. "This goes to the judge." "It will," he said. "But Eleanor, after this, there's nothing left for her to lose. Be careful." I nodded. "I've faced worse enemies." That night, the Pacific roared outside Ryan's window. I stood on the porch, the wind tearing at my hair, salt biting the air. I imagined Lydia somewhere in that darkness, pacing her rented apartment, watching everything crumble. She had taken my son, but she couldn't take my purpose. Justice wasn't done yet, but it was close. I closed my eyes and pictured Ryan, not the frail figure in that hospital bed, but the boy who once ran down this very beach, laughing, chasing the waves. "This is for you," I whispered to the night. Every single step. Behind me, the house creaked, as if it were breathing again, alive for the first time since he'd gone. The storm had only begun, but I was ready for whatever came next. The courthouse in downtown Los Angeles always smelled faintly of coffee and marble polish, an odd combination that clung to the air like nervous sweat. On the morning of the trial, I arrived before sunrise. The sky was the color of bruised steel, and the ocean mist had followed me inland, curling through the streets like a quiet omen. I'd worn the same navy blue suit I'd used for Ryan's college graduation, the last time I'd dressed for something that mattered. Marcus stood waiting by the steps, a stack of folders pressed to his chest, his jaw tight but eyes steady. "You ready?" he asked. "I was born ready," I said. He gave a faint smile. "Then let's finish this." Inside, the courtroom buzzed with low murmurs. Reporters lined the back row, cameras tucked discreetly beneath coats. Lydia sat at the defense table, dressed in black again, her hair perfectly curled, her makeup immaculate. She glanced up as I entered, and for a brief second, I saw a flicker of something, fear, maybe, but then her lips curved into a small, rehearsed smile. The judge entered, a silver-haired woman with calm authority. "Court is now in session," she said. "Case number 457-C, the estate of Ryan Graves versus Lydia Graves." The air tightened. Marcus began the opening statement. His voice was firm, deliberate, every word polished like ammunition. "Your Honor, we are here because the defendant, Mrs. Lydia Graves, exploited, neglected, and abandoned her husband during the final months of his life. While he lay dying from late-stage cancer, she diverted funds intended for his treatment to finance a life of excess yachts, jewelry, designer clothes, using accounts she shared with the deceased. This isn't about money. It's about justice for a man who suffered alone while his wife celebrated his decline. The ambulance came at midnight. I saw it myself. He looked so pale, so weak. I tried calling Lydia, but she shook her head. The very next morning, she posted pictures online on a yacht, champagne glass in hand. She's been gone ever since. My fingers tightened around the handle of my bag. For a second, the world went silent, the sound of the ocean, the chirping birds. Everything disappeared under a cold ringing in my ears. "Which hospital?" I asked. "Street Mary's." The defense attorney, a slick young man named Cameron Doyle, rose with a smirk. Objection. Your Honor, my client is not on trial for being wealthy. She loved her husband and made personal financial decisions that overruled, the judge said coolly. Continue, Mr. Hale. Marcus nodded once and called the first witness, Dr. Coleman. The doctor looked uneasy under the courtroom lights, but his voice was clear. Mr. Graves was admitted to St. Mary's Hospital on June 21st, suffering from acute stomach cancer complications. He was in critical condition upon arrival. The hospital made multiple attempts to reach his wife, phone calls, text messages, voicemail, but received no response. Mrs. Graves did not visit at any point during his stay. Marcus leaned forward. Doctor, based on your experience, what was his emotional state during that period? He was lonely, Dr. Coleman said softly. He often asked if his wife would come. The last thing he said before losing consciousness was her name. A hush spread through the courtroom. Even the reporters stopped scribbling. Lydia shifted in her seat, her gaze fixed on the table. Marcus continued, methodical. He presented the photos Rosa had taken: the yacht, the champagne, the party. Then the bank statements, each page projected on the screen for the judge to see. Every transaction glowed like a wound. Here, Marcus said, pointing to one line item, Mrs. Graves spent $12,000 on a yacht rental the same night her husband was admitted to the ICU. The judge's brow furrowed. That's quite the coincidence. Marcus turned to me. Mrs. Graves, please take the stand. The bailiff guided me up. I raised my hand, swore the oath, and Saturday Marcus approached gently, his tone shifting from professional to personal. Eleanor, can you tell the court when you found out your son was hospitalized? I swallowed hard. The morning after I returned home from service, a neighbor told me. I went straight to the hospital. What did you find when you arrived? My son was dying, I said quietly. He was unconscious. The nurses told me Lydia hadn't visited once. And after his death? I looked straight at Lydia, whose expression tightened. She called me 20 minutes after he passed. There was laughter and music behind her. She said she couldn't talk, she was busy. The courtroom was silent, except for the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. Marcus nodded solemnly. No further questions. The defense attorney rose quickly. Mrs. Graves, he began, voice slick as oil. You're a retired naval officer, correct? Yes. Someone who's spent years away from home, often absent from your son's life? Yes. He stepped closer. So it's possible you weren't aware of the dynamic between your son and his wife. Marriage is complicated, wouldn't you agree? Marriage doesn't excuse neglect, I said. He smiled faintly. But you don't really know what happened in that house, do you? Maybe Ryan didn't want her there. Maybe your grief is coloring your perception. I leaned forward, voice calm but edged with steel. My grief doesn't fabricate bank statements, Mr. Doyle. It doesn't invent yacht parties or missed calls. Facts don't care how I feel. A few people in the gallery nodded. The attorney blinked, thrown off rhythm. No further questions, he muttered. When I stepped down, Marcus placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Perfect, he whispered. The prosecution rested after presenting the final piece of evidence, the recovered email thread, where Lydia bragged about spending Ryan's insurance payout. Marcus read it aloud, his voice steady, deliberate. The old lady will never find out. The judge's expression hardened. When it was the defense's turn, Lydia finally stood. She walked to the witness stand, like an actress stepping into the spotlight. I loved Ryan, she began, her voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. But he changed. He stopped talking to me, stopped eating. I was falling apart, and I didn't know what to do. I thought if I could keep living, if I could stay strong, it would help him. I never meant to hurt anyone. Cameron placed a comforting hand on her arm. And the spending? She sniffed delicately. Retail therapy. It was my coping mechanism. People grieve differently. Marcus stood slowly. Mrs. Graves, You rented a yacht and threw a party the night your husband was in critical condition. Is that your idea of therapy? Her eyes flashed. I needed a distraction. And the insurance payout? The offshore account? That's my money, she snapped. He left it to me. Marcus's voice dropped, quiet, but lethal. He left it to his wife.